Honorable Minister Collin Croal, Minister of Housing. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Dr. Yog. Good evening, Gildari.
Good afternoon, sir.
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Great. And welcome to Room 592, sir. And I want to ask, we're going to start our discussion right away. You know, you were not here with us. I know you were busy. We had an attorney at law with us for the past half an hour. We were talking about what's happening.
I was following.
And what's happening across there. And a lot of things are happening. But there is a lot of interest in your ministry, sir. And I would like to ask for your opening statement in regards to you're a new minister. You're now Minister of Housing. You are there 2.5 to 3 weeks, sir. What has been your entry into the ministry like? What has been your experience for 2 weeks? Educate us as to some of the things you might have found when you got there.
Sure. It's actually Ministry of Housing and Water.
And water, yes.
Correct. Yeah, it's been pretty exciting since I've gotten there. There are 2 ministers in this ministry. You have a minister within, Susan Rodriguez. And as you know, if you talk about housing, it's important that you also talk about water, and they are interrelated.
Absolutely.
But since we've gotten here, though, a lot of things I've found interesting. And we remember we're in transition, so we have been going through the various information. Maybe I'll speak a little on housing, and then I'll come to water so that we can separate the issues that are coming up. In terms of housing, though, I've been overwhelmed with a lot of messages and calls in relation to aspects about house lots. And then I've seen some things in the media and so forth. But I want to start off by making it clear that for us, the mandate under the Ministry of Housing is not just about sharing out of an allocation of a lot. It's about having the complete package, or it's about having a hybrid system. You have lots, or you can have options of housing, so which we'll talk a little about just now. But one of the things that I found when we got here is that this year, interestingly, and so let me address it right away. This year, there were a number of allocations made. Letters were issued to persons. And when that is why we've stopped the system that we have now. We've put on hold, the ministry would have issued a statement last night. We've put on hold the issuance as well as collection of money and so forth. The reason being is because the ministry is currently reviewing what has been happening and to have a proper assessment as to what has taken place recently. We found, for example, I was going through the records, as recent as August 1st, you have, which you know that's interesting because that's a public holiday. Right. That's the day before President Irfan Ali was sworn in. You had in this ministry allocations being issued to persons for house lots. You have letters being issued just before election as part of the election gimmick of letters being given to persons, but you can't find really where are these lots because then there's no infrastructure, you can't access the facility. So what we're doing currently, we're reviewing what has been done. That is all we are doing simply. I've seen notices about taking away lots and so forth. No, that's not what we're doing. We're simply carrying out a review because in light of what the certain information that is coming to light. You have, and then when you examine the issuing, you have persons who are they were issued letters of allocations, superseding persons who were in the system waiting for years. How do you explain, for example, people like former Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu, former Minister Tabitha Haley? How do you explain persons like those where the system would show that the application went in June and then they were issued lots in the following month? So it is about reviewing all of these things that have been happening to ensure that we have a fair and transparent system in the issuance of lots. That's all we're going through now, because we believe that what you had just before election is that persons were duped in a lot, giving them letters so that, as part of the election gimmick, that they can gain votes. Well, of course, it didn't work. And so that is what's happening at that's some of the things that we found.
So, Minister, that is very interesting. And ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you that Minister Collin Croal has been extremely friendly to the public. In fact, he is. I know I have sent to him because people normally would communicate with me. They have problems here and there, and Minister has never turned down a message. And I could appreciate where he's coming from, because both Leonard and I have received complaints about persons and their applications for lots, and they're receiving purported letters that were fake and letters that were false. And so I could imagine, Minister, that all of these things that is on your table, you have to really check through things with a fine-tooth comb. You have to go through it before you have to verify everything before you can say so. Because the next thing you know, if you do give an approval for something, it might be something that was a setup for you. So we appreciate where you're coming from. But interesting, I must take you back to that point that you made. I see Leonard is biting at the bits there too. Mr. Moses Nagamutu is part of a list that would have applied for a house lot.
Yes.
I find that. And your ministry gives house lots based on you're not owning a house lot, right?
Well, there are a number of criteria, and that is part of the review we're going through too. So that when we're finished with this current exercise, when we reissue our policy for the allocations for house lots, is that you must be able to have a fair, transparent process and to recognize the persons who have been waiting long in the queue. So for us, we have a fundamental problem that you have jumping up the queue and you have thousands of persons who are waiting. In the system now, Dr. Yoke, there are 68, the system will show that there are 68 active applicants awaiting the issuance of house lots. This year alone, they
68,000, you mean? 68,000?
Pardon me?
68,000?
68,000.
Yes, okay.
Yes. And for this year alone, they issued over 2,000 of those letters for persons in various areas. And so that is what we're doing. We're simply reviewing what took place so that we can have a policy directive and to move forward. But I want to make it clear, I want to shift the discussion a little though.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only for us, there are a number of things that we are working on. Because it's not only, our focus will not only be about the issuance of lots. And of course, our government is committed that we will issue a minimum of 50,000 over this current period, 5 years, which gives you an average of 10,000 lots. And we will achieve that. In fact, we're currently working out the various areas for which we have to prioritize to have our infrastructure done so that we can provide facilities that persons can immediately construct for themselves too. So I started off earlier by making the point. It is also about ensuring that you have the roads, the bridges, the water, and electricity to encourage persons when we allocate that you get an area and you start your construction. That is our focus. But in addition to issuance of lots, there are other things that we are going to be focusing on. Of course, we're going to cater for, or you have semi-professionals, you have professionals. So construction of homes will also be part of our focus. We have many models that we're going to be applying. Of course, you have public-private partnership. You have private sector loan, and you have through capital, raising of capital. The president, I think only yesterday would have spoken about it. And so various models that we'll be working with to be able to address for all level of income, all level of society at the same time. Next week, we will be meeting with the Banking Association so that we can discuss lending rates and things like that, of course, and the discussion will move forward in terms of incentives to encourage persons so that they can have that opportunity for themselves and their family to own their own homes. So construction of homes obviously will have government housing projects. You will have private developers. You will also have the private sector driven, and as I mentioned, through capital markets. So it's a hybrid. So that is why it's an exciting period ahead for us. And at the moment, we are also concentrating on land acquisition. We are meeting with NISIL. You know, a lot of lands are under NISIL.
Right.
We have a cross-sector meeting next week with NISIL, Guyana Lands and Survey Commission, and Gaisuco, because there are lands in various areas that has that falls under different ownership. For example, in the news you've seen squatting among many places, but you know recently the popular one was at South Success. When I visited, and then when we looked at the map, we realized that the land is under the purview of NISIL, and they are addressing that. So we want, as far as practical, to be able to acquire as much land. Why we have to work with these other agencies? Because remember, of our government intention to also reopen many of the sugar estates. So we will have to have collaboration to identify some of those lands that are intended to be put back into the system. So that is where we are.
So two things for you. Yeah, go on.
You asked also earlier about some of the things that we found. In the system here, it will show that land has been acquired. But in those some of those very areas that for which they issued letters this year, the ownership is not even on the Ministry of Housing and Water. So we still have to sit with those agencies to work out how we can acquire some of those lands. Some of those lands have not been properly handed over to the Ministry or Central Housing and Planning Authority. That is
so they basically gave away land they didn't have.
Correct. So that is part of the challenge that we will have. At the ministry level, focus too, of course, you have the aspect about zoning. You know, with the Georgetown expected obviously to expand further with the advent of the oil and gas sector, as well as our improvement in our economy. So we will have to work. We will be working in collaboration with the other ministries to ensure that we have the areas that are properly identified for housing development, for commercial development, because the time will come. The time will come when we also have to look beyond Georgetown, because with the expansion of Georgetown, of relocating persons along for example, the Suicide Highway and so forth. So those are part of the long-term vision and plan of the ministry to implement. At the ministry level, we are also looking at the approval system to improve the efficiency in permissions, granting of permits. We have in the queue at the central housing level, as you're aware, very shortly, a new board will be reinstituted. There have always been complaints about transparency in the issuing of permits, and then the length of time that request for permissions takes at the central housing level. So we're currently reviewing the review time, to looking at the legislations, to see how we can improve, because it's not only about when you send your application, we also have to work with the local authorities. We also have to work with for example, for the fire department, because there are different aspects for which you must have permits. And sometimes you send those documents, you may ask them for the no objection, and the relevant sub-agencies, they take forever to respond. At the end of the day, investor come here, or someone wants to build, and they're waiting long in the queue to have that permission. So that is something we're working on to improve on, and that the Central Housing and Planning Authority board must work in a much more professional and efficient manner. So basically, it's a single window system we're looking to improve. And those are some of the aspects that we're working on at the ministry level.
Great.
At the water sector, I've noticed like I've become my social media has become like a complaints authority, and it shouldn't be, because sometimes I get persons would send their query I forward it to the relevant officer, and believe me, simple aspects about leakage, they fix it the same day. So it means something is not working there. That if I can send a complaint on a leakage, and somebody says they've been reporting this for 3 weeks, and yet the relevant sub-region office doesn't get it fixed. It shouldn't have to come through myself. Very shortly, we'll be having a new CEO for Guyana Water Inc., as well as a newly reconstituted board for the Guyana Water Inc., and most likely in the new week. And so those are some of the things we'll be focusing over there. One of the review that I found is that the staff of GWI within the last period increased from 600 to 1,300. But when persons on the payroll, but when you examine some of the issues and some of the complaints, we don't see the matching improvement. And so that is something the new CEO will have to focus on. Of course, for us, remember
do you have a CEO as yet? Do you have a CEO?
Very shortly, one will be announced. Very shortly.
Okay.
Delivery of safe water. Remember, it's part of our mandate as in the Ministry of Housing and Water, and we're also working to reduce the non-revenue water. There are a lot of leakages. There are a lot of non-paying revenue water. So that is some of the things we have to work on to improve. As part with the budget shortly, the emergency budget, you should hear some measures in terms of our commitment that we made to our people, for our pensioners, especially in terms of looking at subsidy for our pension. There are over 25,000 pensioners in the water database. That is both on a meter and unmetered level. We're currently examining to keep our commitment of making remove the VAT on water. There was a temporary removal at GWI, and that was part of the COVID measure. But we're looking to implement that on a full-time permanent basis as part of our manifesto commitment. So there's a lot of things that are happening at the ministry level for those two sectors. When you talk about...
well, thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Go on.
Yeah, but when you talk about...
I just wanted to ask you some questions. On some of the things, if you don't mind, Minister, before we go on.
Sure, yes, and then I'll know how to respond.
Let me say this, that interactions that yours truly may have had over a number of years with staff at GWI, I must say that a lot of the middle managers, I have not dealt with the CEO and at that level. Very, very pleasant, very nice people there. I must say there are some good people there. But you have had the distinction of firing two CEOs within 2 weeks. One from water and one from housing. So how have you found that experience to be? Was it something that you felt had to be done? Was it because of political appointment? Was it because of you felt that their duties was not being served?
Sure, yes. Well, in the case of Guyana Water Inc., Dr. Van West Charles, it needs no introduction in terms of his political appointment. That needs no explanation. We are clear in terms of we're starting fresh, and as I've said to the media, we are looking to ensure that we have persons in place in the leadership level to carry out our vision or mandate. And the same goes for Central Housing and Planning Authority.
So, Minister, a couple of questions for you on some of the things you said, if you don't mind. For clarification, we need to ask. Now, there are persons that would have been applying since, let us say, 2011. Now that you are there, I'm sorry to put this at you now, what might be a status of an applicant dating 2011 versus all the applications that would have come on 2018, 2017, and so forth? Would that 2011 person think that, or should he or she think that my application is gone, dead, thrown away, I need to reapply?
No. That is why, when I mentioned earlier, as part of our review, we want to ensure that we clear the arrears as a priority. So those persons who are in the system, including new applicants, all will be dealt eventually. of course, we are through our system that we're applying and all. So I want to assure everyone, it doesn't matter if you were there in 2010, if you were in 2011, or even applied in 2019. When the relevant years are being looked at, yes, you will be addressed. No one will be removed from the system.
Great. Great. So recently you have been, well, not recently, you have been you have come under some flack yesterday from no other than, I think, Aubrey Norton, who made certain statements, which I don't know if you would have had the time to see. But I'm reminded of it by one of our viewers, Judy Bentley Brown, who has said that while she understands that you have to look at things, whether there's fraud, whether there fraudulent documents and all of that, but she says she has a problem with your ministry returning monies to applicants because they are innocent applicants. They're innocent of any. You're not returning money?
No, we haven't returned any money. All we're doing currently is reviewing what has been taking place.
Oh, okay. So how did that get to be the news then? That somehow or the other you guys have said we are going to return everybody's money and all of that.
I think that may have been a conversation that took place in somewhere in West Coast, Berbice, but it's not. The ministry, let me clarify this. The ministry intention is not to be targeting anyone. All we're doing currently is to ensure that a free, a fair, a transparent process is applied. And in order for us to properly put things into perspective, we must conduct that review that is ongoing currently. And
right.
We have been at, and I want to put some of the staff on the front burner here too. We have been, for us as new ministers in the ministry, we have been placed at a disadvantage too, because sometimes I find the information that are being provided by the staff is not necessarily forthcoming on the first instance. You have to keep digging, and then you keep getting in further information. And so sometimes you make an informed position, and then when you get additional information, then you realize there's much more to it. And so all we're doing now is reviewing all the what's happening in the system.
Understood. And that will take some time because you have to do a thorough investigation. Minister, on your CEO...
But we're moving quickly.
Good. On your CEO for both GWI and CHPA, will you be inviting applications from qualified persons, or will the government be making a political appointment? And either in both cases.
There are a number of persons who are on the table before us, and that review process is currently taking place.
Okay.
But we're much more advanced. We're much more advanced in naming persons for the respective position.
Right. Because what I found from my own perspective, there are persons in this country that might not necessarily be in the radar of the Honorable Minister of Housing or on the radar of the President or Vice President or one of the politicians, but we might be qualified, and we can probably would love to have an opportunity to get ourselves into a job, be it GWI, be it whatever it is.
Yeah, but remember, But remember, there are technical positions too outside of being outside of the CEO. There are other technical positions within the two agencies, for which technical persons have an opportunity should vacancy arise.
Great. Now, Minister, with regards to you mentioned earlier that you would be looking, and your ministry will be looking at regularizing some areas. Now, question on regularizing, if that will be something that you will do, where people are squatting, will of course be, and I'm saying this to your credit, sir, I feel for you and I feel for the ministry, because squatting has taken place on some really bad places. For example, sidelines, where you need access to clean, well, yes, you and others would need access to clean the drainages and clean the canals. And when squatting takes place on top of the dams, then you cannot get to clean. So that's one that I would ask your comment on. And two, sir, you said that that you'll be giving private house lots and also be looking at developers. What will your ministry do for those developers that your previous PPP government gave huge plots of land to develop, but have not done anything with the land?
Commercial lands, because those fall under commercial lands. The allocations that have been done under the commercial land are also under review. It's not only the residential lots. There were there for this year. There were some commercial plots that have been allocated. So those are also under review. All are under review. But I want
Great.
to, yeah, but I want to, yes, I want to expand a little though in terms of the public-private partnership in terms of development outside of the allocation of lots. Very shortly, you will see an advertisement for going to the media for an expression of interest for public-private partnership for construction of housing units in various areas of the Region 4 and including West Bank, Demerara. So we'll be sending out expression of interest so persons can apply, and so that in the new week you will see that in the media. So we're moving. That's why I said we're moving pretty quickly on all fronts. There's a lot.
And I must say this to you. Sorry to interject, Minister, but I must say this to you. I feel a little bit pressured to ask you some of these questions, knowing you're only in office 2.5 to 3 weeks. But you know how it goes. You have no honeymoon period, right? You have to take it as it comes. So,
but I wanted to address the squatting before you move on.
Go on. Yes.
Squatting, you know, is an old problem. And in fact, we at the ministry, there's a department for squatting regularization. And it's even compounded further whenever you have a change in government. There's always a trend that shows that persons feel that they can start, you know, occupying empty land or unavailable lands, and then you have to go move them. So every week since we're here, I've had to send team out to, based on reports received of new squatting, and then they have to issue letters. But I want to make this statement very clear. No new squatting will be allowed or entertained. The aggressive drive that the PPPC government has for the housing sector will allow everyone an opportunity at the appropriate time, because we understand the challenge that is out there. We know that the demand is huge, but we're working to ensure that we remove the arrears and then, of course, bring it on par. And so that is why I want to repeat again, we're not going to encourage squatting, and we're going to have an aggressive drive against any new squatting. But it's a challenge. You talk about along the areas of the reserve. The water that you're drinking in Georgetown, there are persons who are squatting right at the back of the conservancy, well, you call it the Blacker. I visited that area too. We are looking to address that in the not too distant future when we're looking at the allocation. But you need that area to be clear. That's the water that's coming through to be, of course, treated before it gets to your household. So that is part of the challenge we're faced with in terms of squatting. But we always have our eyes open.
And I could imagine your great concern, as anybody in your capacity would be, access, right? Because when people squat on these strips and squat on these things, then access to, I mean, if something goes wrong, if you need to dredge, if you need to do anything to these outlets and so forth, then
and
access
pollution
becomes
too,
impossible. And pollution, of course. Minister, if you don't mind, I want to come back to commercial plots of land, because there's been a lot said pre-2015 elections about the PPP government handing off huge plots of lands to private developers who, I'm just reading aloud, some people say that would have been used and the developers creamed a lot of money up, and some developers washed money up, and but generally what they're saying is that a lot of people who were friends to the last PPP government got plots of land along the Diamond area, acres of land, and have not developed it. Is Minister Collin Croal under this PPPC government? Will your approach be differently so that friends and families are not going to be afforded what might have been perceived to have been afforded in the
Well,
past.
whatever policy, the Collin Croal policy will be the policy of the PVPC government. So it won't be a separate policy of our government. But for those commercial area lots that have been given and for which nothing has been done, we have a team that will be going out to address that. So if you're talking about those that are already given, but as I said, the system will be fair, it will be transparent, and that is why I mentioned just now that we will, for those allocations, we will have expression of interest so that every developer will have that opportunity to apply and put their self in the system. And once they propose, when we're ready to deal with proposals, once it satisfies the criteria, it doesn't matter who you're a friend with, you will benefit accordingly.
And
So I don't need to become your friend to get land. And let me hand you over to Mr. Leonard Gildari for his question.
yeah, thank you very much, and friends and family.
Leonard,
housing, yeah, you know.
don't take yourself a friend to the minister. You don't get the land.
No. I'm here as a media man. I'm very careful. I got to be very careful in what I'm doing. But leading up to from 2011 and so on, I covered housing, so it's a very big pet subject of mine. I used to interview the now president, Dr. Finale, a lot, and in fact we had a lot of clashes back and forth over it. But that being said, there's a couple of questions that I want to ask you. So somebody's asking if you're living overseas. I know there was a remigrant scheme that they would have had. How easy it is, or how possible is it for somebody to apply for that? First question.
Yeah, well, in terms of, well, as I said, we're catering for everyone, and even that's why I mentioned about the professional and semi-professional housing as a category. Of course, there will be an area allocated for that. But there will be minimum. We haven't set out the policy. There is a policy in place before, but even to review what is there, we haven't finally discussed that as to how we'll go about dealing with in terms of the migrant. But that is something we will also cater for migrants.
Yes,
it's been done before, so it's nothing new.
Right. I know. I think
Because
that's in the Providence area there.
Yeah, but Leonard, we also want to encourage, because we want to encourage others to return. We want to encourage persons to come back to serve their country. And that is why I also spoke about, in addition to those who are here, we also have to look at incentives so that you can encourage persons to come back and, reinvest back into their country. Because when you remigrate, you bring a lot of resources too. And so the country benefits. It's a win-win situation for the country.
A little earlier, Minister, you would have spoken about, I think, former Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu and Tabitha Haley. I'm curious, a little follow-up, because where are these lands located? Because we were told that there are not any lands located. Very quickly, could you give us a little up-to-date? Where are these lands?
Their application, they would have, for the allocation would have been somewhere on the East Bank.
That's interesting.
Among me, I only mentioned those two. There are others. There's a long list of persons, but I've only mentioned those two as examples.
And there is a big problem. I'm not seeing a lot of people talking about it, but along the East Bank there, between Farm to Diamond Grove area there's over 35,000 Venezuelans in Guyana, and there's thousands, I understand, that is located between Farm to Grove. How has the Ministry of Housing and Water started to maybe contemplate or started looking at the possibility of how do they handle the influx of maybe the Venezuelans and the Cubans and all the others that are here? Because sometimes
we started to address.
Go ahead.
We have started to address our mind to those category of persons. Not in Region 4, outside of Region 4, we've started to address our mind in terms of land. But outside of Region 4.
And of course, the elephant in the room. There's been a lot of accusations against staffers within the ministry. How does the Collin Croal or the PPP government intend to deal with this problem that seems to be dogging the ministry for a very long time?
And well, once you have information that we can that we'll certainly investigate and follow up. Only yesterday, someone provided me a tip, but I couldn't advance the investigation because I needed something a little more tangible to work on. But I have that information, and as I can work my way through, then I'd certainly follow up on it. But yes, we first of all we have at the ministry level, we'll be having an open door policy, notwithstanding the COVID regulation, and that is why we're restarting the open day just after our the debates on the budget. That'll be presented very shortly, and so sometimes the budget debates, they run for 2 weeks. But just after that, the ministry will commence its open day on Tuesdays, and that is one. So you'll do it through appointments because we need to practice the restriction in terms of the COVID regulations. But we'll advertise very shortly how we go about doing that. So I want to encourage persons there, and if you have information, please feel free to send it to the minister's office. We'll certainly investigate it. But yes, I have heard rumors in terms of within the ministry.
Yes, and of course, Minister, Guyana is not about Demerara alone. And what would you say to the people up in Berbice and in Esquimalt as well, and maybe Linden and the other areas?
Yes, we are examining land for every region. It's not a region. The ministry policy is not a region 4 or coastland basis. It's for all regions. We're examining to find land so that we can make available. So I want to be assure the nation on that.
Great.
Yes, and Yogan, just an observation here. While I was doing a lot of work with housing, I found that the point was made by the now president here, Finale, about the spin-offs, because you had banks, transportation industry, lawyers, you have the what you call the contractors. There's so many things, so many spin-offs that were happening because of the housing industry. And I'm sure that somewhere along the line, I would like to see it start back. There was even the Housing Expo. I hope that's something that you think back to do, because it was such an interesting thing where they bring together all the
There will
hardware
be
stores and so on. And it was interesting seeing the products that they had there. I would love to see that sometime or the other.
there will be a building expo next year.
Very good. I like that.
The launching for that will be sometime in another month and a half. There'll be a launching for the Building Expo to be held next year.
Very good. Yog?
Great.
Of course, the focus will not be narrowed on just housing. It's going to be huge.
Correct.
Our president is charged us as ministers to ensure that we think big. We think about the long-term development of our country, and it's the same thing we're doing in terms of the housing sector, to ensure that when we're thinking about the housing drive, to look at the long-term solutions for Guyana.
Yes.
Right. Now, Minister, you have stepped into the shoes of no other than a man who's now the president of the country. And when he was the Minister of Housing and Water, he had also held out a portfolio, but that aside, he had created quite some strides. He was very energetic. He had created quite some impressive strides in housing and done quite a lot of things. How do you feel stepping into his shoes, sir?
Will be a huge you'll be a huge shoe to follow. But for me, a lot of persons have asked me this. I'll be honest with you here. And for me, I see this as an advantage that my president sat here as the Minister of Housing and Water. So it means that therefore that we can, the drive for this sector, I have a great motivator, no doubt, no less than the president. And so I see it as an advantage.
Right. Now, I want to get back to, I'm actually receiving some messages. So I want to ask you back a question in relating to private developers, because a person has sent an inbox message, Minister. Is it your policy that when persons submit an interest in doing development, are you keen on a holistic approach? In other words, what's your take on the presentation of a plan? Are you keen on them ensuring drainage, electricity, water, and everything else? Or will your ministry be meeting them halfway? And this person is extremely keen on what's your thinking about drainage as an important part of any housing development.
Drainage and road will be part of the infrastructure development for the housing development. So in terms of that, in terms of the house lots, in terms of developers, it has when you're going to present a proposal, the proposal must, of course, also fit into our direction in which we're moving our country towards. And so there are a lot of factors that will go into place when you're evaluating a proposal submitted. And that,
Right.
but what has happened too, what we're reviewing currently, because there's always been a close relationship, well, in our previous government time, a close relationship in terms with Go Invest and the Ministry of Housing and Water. And so we are currently reviewing how we'll go about doing that. And that is why I mentioned earlier about the single review system
Right.
to improve efficiency. Because time is of essence, and money too. And so we want to reduce the waiting period for when you make your submissions. Once it's valid, that it be dealt with in a timely manner.
Beautiful. So you are keen on ensuring infrastructure and so forth. Everybody fits into the puzzle.
Correct.
Before you think. Sir, my last question to you. Minister of Housing and Water, Mr. Irfan Ali, now President, he also had developed an extremely good initiative of inviting the local commercial banks to come on board and to work with applicants for housing. Will that also be something that you and your current government will also be keen on doing?
Yes. That is why I've mentioned we're meeting the Banking Association.
Yes.
But even before that invitation, we're meeting next week. The New Building Society, very early when took up this office, reached out and indicated that they are ready to and willing to work on improving collaboration. And of course, we have to look at the interest rates and the lending rate.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, the banking sector will play an important role.
Great. Well, Minister, it's been a pleasure to have you here, and our hour has run out so very quickly. We do know, and I ask you to be patient with us, we do know that your ministry, fortunately, I believe, because you are a people's person and you don't mind interacting, but your ministry attracts so many questions and so many queries from members of the public. Minister, may I ask that, in a couple of weeks' time, please return. And when you return, we're probably going to have a little bit more of an open format where we'll be reading out to you some of the, and maybe invite both you and, if possible, your fellow minister to also join us at any time, because people would love to have a further conversation with you, especially as your plans are unfolding, given that the emergency budget should be released sooner rather than later, sir. Your final thoughts, sir, as we bring our program to its closure.
Yeah, thank you. I must thank you for inviting me here tonight, and it will be a pleasure to be back at your convenience. I'm always happy to share what we plan for our nation. The housing sector will be one of the drivers of the economy under PBPC government. There are a lot of, the time doesn't permit us to go into the spin-off that we expect from the housing drive. But that is something you can be rest assured that will play an important role. And so I want to close out therefore by saying that we are working as a team to ensure that we deliver to the needs of our people. We understand the demand. We understand the challenges out there. Sometimes, the amount of messages I receive, I just can't respond to all of them. And when you read some of them, you understand the plight that are faced by men, confronting people and the need, demand. And so there are a lot of things that can be done, and you really want it to be done as quickly as possible. Of course, resources has to play a role. So we will continue to respond, and we'll continue to work together to ensure that right across our country, that we have development for housing and for the more safe water for our citizens, right, for everyone.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Minister. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And I must say to you, sir, after 3 weeks, good job. You're really doing well. And on behalf of our viewers and listeners, keep up the good work. And that message is for you both, you and your fellow minister within the ministry, and as well as the staff who are dedicated to serving the people of Guyana. We know you are going to make us proud, sir. Do keep up the good job, and we look forward to continuing engagement with you.
Thank you very much.
So do have a great night, Minister, and our regards to the family as well, sir.
Thank you, I will. And to our viewers, thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you very much, sir.
Great. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you all join us here in Room 592, where we unleash the truth. And tonight we've been privileged to have the Honorable Minister of Housing and Water, Mr. Collin Croal, tell us about what he has found there in the ministry after having, they hit the ground running basically, and what are some of his immediate plans. Interestingly, we spoke about quite a few things, Leonard. We spoke about migrants. We spoke about the housing problems in Guyana. He revealed 68,000 applicants are in the system. He also revealed that surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the politicians of the previous government, including the Prime Minister, would have made applications and received lands very, very quickly. We also spoke about development, private developers, interaction with the banks and other agencies. Leonard, it was quite a good discussion, wasn't it?
I like that, and young minister, very forthright, and I like this kind of conversation that we're having with our people in power. We should not be scared to say it, to call a spade, and say what the situation is. If we don't have money or we're facing challenges, let's don't beat around the bush. Let's say it. I kind of like the conversation where it has been headed over the last couple of weeks, talking to several ministers. Of course, I didn't like the fact that you asked him to compare his foot size to the good president, Dr. Irfan Ali. But that's okay. I know that you were kidding there, and so I will have to protect my minister as well. But it is a good thing to hear some of the reality. But 68,000, I think there's going to be a tall order to really fill in terms of finding the lands. Maybe, I think a couple of years back, the Ministry of Housing was looking along the highway. Maybe something called Silica City there. That's where they wanted to go. So it's going to be interesting to see how they find the lands and then open up those lands.
I thought you were talking about a hideout. You said highway, not hideout, right?
You're talking about the Umbrella Resort? Is that what you're saying? I don't know, man.
Well, Leonard, it's been a pleasure to be here with you tonight, my friend. Always a pleasure to share the platform with you here. I know it's a Friday evening, and so our viewers and listeners would want to also have some time with their family. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're joining us from, it's been a pleasure to have you here in Room 592, where we unleash the truth. Let me just say this to you. We look forward to having a discussion with you all in the presence of, look forward to having a discussion with Minister Frank Anthony in front of you all on Monday night, as we have an update on COVID-19. And we're also hoping to have the company of one other minister with us on the same night. We will reveal to you over this weekend who the minister will be. As the discussion continues, ladies and gentlemen, remember it is weekend. Be safe, stay away from others, and please keep yourself and family COVID-free. Ladies and gentlemen, as I say every time we have Room 592, say a prayer for this country of ours. It is still the best place on earth. Say a prayer for our countrymen. It is unity that will make us all achieve great things. May God bless this beautiful country of ours. May God bless each and every one of you. Bye-bye now.